Makkot Daf Kaf Gimel Amud Beis, finale to this wonderful Masechta of Makkot, reward, sanctity and freedom. Akadosha Baruch Hu lezakot et Israel. The famous piece of Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia. Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia we don't know a lot about. We've only got two records of comments by Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia, but this one has become very, very famous. He makes one in a Tosefta in Masechta Shkolim, and this is the other one in Halacha and one in Agadata. And Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia says, as we quote every time we finish a piece of Mishnah, we want to say Kaddish de Rabbanon, and we finish Pirkei Avos. Akadosha Baruch Hu lezakot et Israel. Hashem wanted to give advantage to the Jewish people. Lפיכך, therefore, what did he do? Did he give us oil wells in Eretz Israel? No, he didn't do that. Did he give us gold in Eretz Israel? No, he didn't do that. The oil's for the Arab countries, the gold is for the Russians and for the South Africans, diamonds for the South Africans. What did he give us? לפיכך הרבה להם תורה ומצות. He gave us a fortune of Torah and mitzvahs. This is how the Masechta finishes off in the Mishnayos. We're looking at the last Mishna of Masechta Avos rather than the last piece of Gemara. And it's the strangest way to finish Masechta Makkos. We've just been learning about death sentences and golus and Makkos, the lashings that you get. Anything you do wrong, you do this, and how you can get 5 for doing one action wrong, you can get 5 sets of lashings, all sorts of terrible consequences. Hashem wanted to give us an advantage, so he gave us even more Torah and mitzvahs, so that we can get more lashings, that there's more possibility of death sentences. What is this about? And in a way, the shir was stimulated by a comment that Nicholas made on YouTube. Nicholas is a non-Jewish person who listens to every single Matmon, absorbs it, integrates it, listens to it many times, and makes some very, very interesting comments and raises some interesting questions. And he said, why is there just such a focus on punishment? Surely we would get further if we motivated people by rewarding them for the good things they do. All Masechta and all the punishments that come from the bad things that we do. So let's try and understand that. And that's really what the last Mishnah deals with. It deals with a paradox in Parshas Acharei Mot. We have 2 psukim in Parshas Acharei Mot. The one is, Ki kol sheyaseh mikol ha'tevot ha'ele. Anybody who does any of these disgusting things, v'nichretu ha'nefashot ha'asot mikerev amam. Those souls will be cut off from their nations. Terrible consequences for doing any of the things wrong that are listed there in Parashat Acharei Mot. And we've also got a passage, Ushmartem et chukotai ve'et mishpatai. Be careful to observe, to keep my mitzvot, my mishpatim and chukim, asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem, which if a person observes, he will live by. So the Mishnah is concerned, are the mitzvahs here to give us life, or the mitzvahs here to be a risk? So the Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon אומר, נאמר ונכרתו הנפשות העשות, ואומר שיעשה אותם אדם וחי בהם. Rabbi Shimon poses the question resulting from this paradox. What do we learn from this? הכל היושב ולא עבר עבירה, נותנים לו שכר כעושה מצווה. If a person doesn't do something wrong, it's not just that he avoided doing the wrong. He gets the reward of actually doing a mitzvah. And getting the reward doesn't just mean you get the reward. If you're getting the reward of doing the mitzvah, that means you've got the benefits of doing a mitzvah. Your soul has developed in the same way as it would have done by doing a mitzvah. And so Hashem raises the stakes. He turns up the consequences. He turns up the stakes. If you do something wrong, the result could be terrible, because the higher the stakes of the wrongdoing, the higher the reward of the right doing. The higher the risk, the higher the reward. So Hashem makes these, that's the Ratzah, Akadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Israel. So he raises the stakes of the mitzvahs so that even by not doing something wrong, never mind by doing something wrong, just from desisting from doing something wrong, we get enormous benefit and reward. Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Rabbi learns it slightly differently from different source, and he says, the Torah says, just be very strong not to eat any blood. If you've got to be very strong not to eat blood of an animal, you get reward for not doing it. גזל ועריות שנפשו של אדם מתעווה להם ובחמדם. What about things like theft and sexual offenses that people want, that people crave? הפורס מהם הלך עד כמה וכמה שיזכה לו. If a person desists from things he has a desire to do, a person has a craving to do, and you hold yourself back from that, even if you hold yourself back from eating blood, who wants to eat blood? Nevertheless, by holding yourself back, there's benefit. Holding yourself back from something you want to do, then yizke lo uledorotav uledorotorotav. Just look at this. Just not doing one avera, you get benefit for yourself, for your future generations, and for the future generations of future generations. Ad sof kol adorot, until the very end. Sometimes we come across people in life who are not particularly good people. They're very ordinary, and sometimes they're very less than ordinary, and they do exceptionally well. They have wonderful lives. And we start asking Tzaddik V'Ralo, Rosh V'Tzovlo, why do so many Tzaddikim have to struggle and so many Rishonim have an easy life? Imagine if some of these people's grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents were Moser Nefesh not to do wrong. Might have been generations ago. That benefit goes down the generations. We instill not only in ourselves, but in the DNA of our future generations an enormous power and such merit and such reward and such outcome by holding back from doing something wrong. Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia Omer, הקדוש ברוך הוא. Now you see this in context. On that, says Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia, Hashem wanted to give advantage to the people, Jewish people, therefore he gave us many mitzvot. Says Rashi, כדי שיהיו מקבלים שכר במה שמונעים עצמם מן העבירות. What is the advantage? The magnitude of the outcome, of the positive outcome we gain from every resistance we show to wrongdoing. לפיכך בא להם שלא היה צריך לצוות כמה מצוות וכמה אזהרות על שקצים ונבלות. Asks Rashi an amazing question, and he gives a difficult answer. I understand all these mitzvot, and we hold ourselves back from them, and we get reward for that. But why did we get mitzvot which we wouldn't, in other words, averot, wrongdoings that we wouldn't do in any case? You can't eat these creepy, crawly things. Okay, there's certain parts of the world where they eat them, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about civilized Jewish people. A civilized Jewish person is not going to go and eat worms and bugs, and that's not what we do. Why does Hashem have to say you mustn't eat them, and if you eat them, it's a terrible thing? Why does Hashem have to say that? Anybody is disgusted by them. To give us reward for not doing them. If they weren't a mitzvah, if eating worms was not an isur, was not a transgression, then by not eating worms, you wouldn't be a mitzvah. It would just be you're just not doing something you don't want to do. By making it a mitzvah, by making it a prohibition, every time you don't eat a bug, every time you check your fruit, you check your vegetables, you avoid eating, each time it's an amazing mitzvah that you're doing. That's the zchus that the Rebbe Hashem gives us. The question is, if people naturally wouldn't do that, why is there so much reward? What is the reward for? Is the reward for doing something that you have no desire to do in any case? Why would you be rewarded for that? For that, we must understand that when something becomes a rule, and this links back to the Rosh Chodesh that's now online on two journeys, one to healing and one to freedom, where I explained, and we'll talk about it a little bit further in a moment, that when something becomes a rule, when something becomes rigid and is imposed, there's a natural resistance to it. We don't like being told what to do. Nobody likes being told what to do. We don't mind helping if somebody asks for help, but we don't want to be instructed. We don't want to be directed. If I were to say to you, can you please help me? Can you get me that sefer up on the shelf? Sure, no, not a problem. And if I were to say to you, Joey, get me that sefer, what does that feel like? The immediate response is, no, get it yourself. We don't respond to instruction. We don't respond to direction. So the resistance is created by it becoming a rule. The fact that Hashem hibalaim Torah u'mitzvot, the fact that Hashem gave us mitzvot, He made rules, even of things we don't need rules for, adds to our resistance and makes them a mitzvah, because when you overcome resistance, you become strong. That's in all areas. And every time you overcome resistance, where you overcome the resistance of gravity by lifting weights, or you overcome the resistance of your own laziness and inertia by putting in effort for something, getting up in the morning or going for a run, whatever it is that you do that isn't natural, by overcoming natural resistance, by overcoming the resistance of nature, of science, of physics, by overcoming resistance and spiritual resistance, we build strength, we build capacity, and that's a strength which we infuse into the DNA of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren as well. And that's why when Hashem turns an obvious desisting into a mitzvah, into a commandment, it takes on a completely different power in its ability to raise us. And that's the element of reward. There's a beautiful Tanya. The Tanya is an amazing sefer for those who are able to understand it, or at least understand parts of it. It's not an easy sefer to understand the intention, to understand exactly what the Tanya means. And it's one of these amazing sforim that were written way ahead of its time. It's a sefer that fuses Musar and Kabbalah and psychology. One of the problems with psychology is it doesn't take into account the soul. That's not the realm of psychology. But to try and understand human behavior with the soul out of the picture, there's just one dimension. It's like trying to understand human behavior without understanding emotions. There was a time when psychiatry tried to deal with human beings without relating to the emotions. And then in psychology, the emotional part of the human being became much more important. But there's still then the spiritual part, there's the soul part. And the Tanya just understands human behavior in terms of soul issues. And he says, talking about sadness which results from the fact that you feel you're not making progress. You keep on thinking bad thoughts, just unclean ideas cross your mind at different times of the day. And that's what, in our society where everything's so out there, that happens all the time. And young people, particularly yeshiva students, but not only, can get very despondent because of that. Adirabah says, on the contrary, says the Tanya, yesh lo lismoach b'chelko. You should be thrilled when that happens. Oh, my mind is distracted. I'm thinking of all sorts of things I shouldn't be thinking. I feel so guilty. No, celebrate, says the Tanya. Because if you can occupy your mind with something else, you can acknowledge, yes, I've had this negative thought. Let me now get back to the Gemara. Let me review the Matmonim this morning, and you get your mind back into Torah. Then you're keeping the mitzvah that's in the Kriyat Shema every day. You've just been mekayim a mitzvah. You've just fulfilled the mitzvah. What are you depressed about? And this isn't talking about huge tzaddikim that never do anything wrong. That's not what the Shema is talking about. It's talking about ordinary people. Etc. We're talking about ordinary people who have these thoughts. When the Torah says, Lo taturu, we used to read, don't follow your eyes and don't follow your heart, don't follow your thoughts when they're negative. That's talking about you and I. And the Torah says, you're going to have these thoughts. I'm not telling you not to have the thoughts. I'm just telling you not to act on the thoughts. So every time you have the thought and you choose to take your mind off them and invest your attention in something else, you're mekayim a mitzvah d'oraisa v'lo taturu. And now he quotes our Mishnah. And when you hold back from doing wrong, it's as if you've done a mitzvah. And so when you avoid doing something wrong, you should feel as joyous as when you've done something right. That's how you should feel. You've done a great mitzvah, you feel joy. You're busy doing a great mitzvah, you feel joy. When you hold yourself back from doing an avera, it's exactly the same joy, because you're being mekayim a mitzvah. So that's part of the reward of all of these mitzvot. Every time that you don't do something, and you hold back and you think, when you've got to check your lettuce once again, you think, what a bind. Instead of thinking what a bind, to realize I'm being mekayim such a mitzvah by making sure that I'm not eating anything I don't need to eat. But it goes beyond that. It's not just the reward that comes from doing it. Rav Kook says in the Shmona Prokim, "V'lamadnu shelo rak avira nimusit hi pirtzata arayot." doing something which in this case is talking about things that are sexually inappropriate is not just an ethical issue, a moral issue, a societal issue. Ela davar amok mutba b'shoresh nishmato shel adam. He explains that v'hayu lebasar echad, that in the Torah, when Adam and Eve became one being, they connected together physically, emotionally, spiritually. That was before they had shame. So they had no awareness of sexuality. And already v'hayu lebasar echad. So he says that the concept of family and of unity and of sanctity of family life, that was there before there was a sexual awareness at all in humanity, which teaches us it's something that's implanted deep in the human soul. Shechot'o chomes nafsho. When you sin, you're robbing your soul. Not a beautiful idea of what an aveira is. Not just disobeying Hashem. I'm robbing my neshama of a gift. Va'pores mehem, and if somebody desists, nikra kadosh be'etzem, he's called a holy person. So it's not just the reward, it's also the sanctity that comes with resisting. And so with every mitzvah Hashem has given us and told us, don't do this and don't do that, with every one of those, there's added benefit in the sense not only that there's great reward, that my soul is strengthened and developed, but I'm also able to establish a great degree of kedusha. But there's a third element as well, which we talked about in the Rosh Chodesh year, and that is the journey from, and this applies now to the time we're in, from Pesach to Shavuot, the journey from Cherut to Charut, where I explained that physical freedom and spiritual and intellectual freedom are at odds with one another. The more the more behavioral freedom we have, the less intellectual and spiritual freedom. The more behavioral rigidity we have, the more behavioral rules we have to abide by, the more behavioral uniformity there is, the freer the mind is. We don't understand that these work opposite to one another. And so if we see it as I mentioned, we see it in society. Progressive liberals in the Western world today, they free us of behavioral norms. You can do what you want. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Each person can do their own thing. But when it comes to thinking, we will tell you what you have to think and what you have to say. So you've got the progressive liberals very free on behavior, very tight on thought. You've got the more conservative people are very tight on behavior. Certain things you do and you don't do. But think what you want, freedom of speech, say what you want, think what you want, but not act what you want. When one doesn't have to make decisions about actions because those decisions are already formulated, you're free for your mind to expand, your mind can explore. If I'm constantly having to use my mind to decide what to do, then my mind is very restricted because there's a physical outcome, an immediate physical outcome of everything I think about. And I'm constantly thinking of what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? That's why Mark Zuckerberg says, I wear the same thing every day. I don't want to have to make a decision every morning. One decision less. I don't have to decide what I'm going to wear every day. Grant, you told me that once as well about the way you dress, right? It's the same way every day. There's nothing to think about with that. It's done. And our whole life is like that. I don't have to think about what do I do next when I'm dressed. I've done negavasa every day. I don't have to think, should I do negavasa or shouldn't I? Modani, I've done. I get dressed. I come to the shir. I daven shachris. Put on my talis. It's all regimented. It's all. I go to work. I've daven mincha. It's all. The whole day is regimented. I don't have to think about that. So now I can think about whatever I want. I can think about an idea which might not have any impact on my day-to-day behavior. It doesn't have to have impact on my day-to-day behavior because my day-to-day behavior is already set. So my mind is now free to think about things that go far beyond that. Intellectual and spiritual freedom come when there is behavioral rigidity. So when the Ribbono Shel Olam gives us rules, that going back to say, when Hashem says, as Rashi says, by making it a rule, we kind of resist it, yes, but in addition to that, that frees us. Those rules that Hashem has given, that lפיכך הרבה להם תורה ומצוות, by giving us not only more mitzvot, the mitzvot restrict our behavior. That's great, because with regimented behavior, my mind is free. And then he gave us Torah in which to explore with my mind. What a gift! He gave me behavioral discipline and intellectual freedom. What nation has got that gift? That's Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael. That's the advantage that we've got, and we've got to take that advantage. We've got to rejoice in the rigidity of behavior so that we can equally rejoice in the freedom of thought. The problem is when they go hand in hand. When you try and be free in both, you get into chaos. And if you try and be rigid in both, you become a prisoner. If you restrict your behavior by halakha, which we have to, and then you restrict your thinking also, how I'm going to think in Torah and what I'm going to think and what's okay and what isn't okay, and it's very restricted and narrow, then you're a prisoner. You have no freedom in thought and you have no freedom in action. The idea is to be able to be restricted in our action, that everything we do is al pi Shulchan Aruch. Everything we do is according to the Shulchan Aruch. Once those are the mitzvot. Now we have the Torah, now we can engage in thought and in the exploration and adventure of the soul into places we would never have thought if we were regarding everything from a practical perspective and through a practical lens. That allows us to explore the world of reality, the world of spirituality, and the reward of Kedusha with total freedom.